How's it going? My name's Anthony Casa. Welcome to my workshop, and today I've set some time aside this morning to show you all how to do a dovetail and do it pretty damn good. So I've got my bits of offcuts here. At the moment I actually don't need to make a drawer for anything, so I've just got these offcuts, and actually it probably wouldn't be a bad thing. We can go over drawer construction next time around. So these are pieces of Victorian ash, and typically with your drawers, if it hasn't got a false front, you'd have your front piece would be thicker. So in this case I've got it set to, it should be 20 mil. Just a B stick over 20 mil, and this one is your side, and your side is normally thinner, especially when you're talking drawer construction. So we're talking drawer construction. Yeah, it's normally thinner, and this one will be at 14. So first up, I like to do my tails first, and then scribe them onto my pins. And as you'll see, I do like to use a knife to create my dovetails, just because it gives your chisel a nice marking to sort of set into, which you'll see shortly. Okay, so first things first, we want to get our drawer front and our side, and we want to mark them where we'd like to have them situated. So let's say we want to go this way, so all I would do is mark my front with however you'd like. I tend to do this like a swirly thing. You could do an @ you could do a triangle, it doesn't really matter, it's just so you know. And mark the top edge. And again, we want to mark our two faces and top edges, so we know that they go on the outside. And that is a little bit important. So we'll put our front aside for now, and we'll start marking this out. So first things we need to do is grab my verniers, marking gauge, bevel square, my knife and an actual square, and I've got a little ruler. Right, so first thing I want to do is set my bevel up, and best way to do that, you've either got a 1 to, well really it's whatever you like. There's some people do 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 8, and that's a ratio. So when I say 1 to, let's say I want to do these at 1 to 6, so you're either coming out 1 inch by 6 inches, or in this case I'm coming out 10 mil by 60 mil. And then all I'm going to do is keep the bevel centered so that it gives you a good, you can flip it. And then it's just a matter of lining those two marks up. So we've got our 1 to 6 set. Next thing I want to do is sort out how deep we want to go, which normally you want to go about 3/4. Which what I like to do is actually mark my depth gauge on the side, which you'll see why in a minute. That way this gets set up once and all's good. So I've got my vernier set to 14, and this. So you don't have to use a vernier, you could use just a ruler if you wanted. I just like to use verniers just because it's quite accurate, and it's going to give me a very good consistent measurement. So before I start actually setting these dovetails out, I'm just going to square that off with a pencil mark, just very lightly. I like to mark out my dovetails where they need to be. I don't like to leave gouge marks running through. It just brings your piece up to a better standard. So the next step is marking out where I want these actual tails to go. So we'll just pop this piece in the vise. Okay, now that we've got you in a bit closer, all I do is square off wherever I want these dovetails to go. And I don't have a rule of thumb of where they should go. I just do whatever I think looks nice. It puts a bit of uniqueness to each piece that I do. Okay, so I've just come in 10mm. Now, the only other thing to consider is your draw base. So by coming in 10mm, you could pretty much fit that groove in inside this dovetail. That way it remains hidden. And I'm going to come 10mm from the top. Okay, so now in here I want to mark 2 pins. Which that's 75.5. 2. So I'll make those 32mm. This one 32mm, so they're equal. And now that this side's marked out, turn it over and we'll just mark out the other side. Just with the same processes. Okay, now that the tails are marked, I want to get my marking gauge. And I'm going to mark where all these shoulders are going to go. Okay, now that they're done, you can see we've got 2 perfectly marked out dovetails. And now let's start, we'll start cutting them. So now I've got my little Japanese pull saw, and I am just going to cut pretty much 1/2 mm to the outside of each line. Okay, now for this point, I'm going to grab a chisel and I'm going to remove this waste. Now the reason why I've done these, I don't own a coping saw, so I do relief cuts, and this way it just makes the waste removal a little bit easier and quicker. And also the other benefit of doing relief cuts is you can practice your saw movements. So how you use a saw, if you're cutting crooked, you can practice and hone your skills. So if you consider the amount of hand joints I've done over the years and the amount of relief cuts I've cut, you get pretty darn good with a saw. So now I'm going to come in, and I'm probably going to be a good 2 mil away from that line, as you can see there, how far in I've come. Okay, now that we've established that first hit, you can be a little bit more rough. And just keep in mind that chisel's going to want to go inwards. So when you go to hit, you want to be pushing backwards. So when you give it a tap, you're trying to guide the chisel in the direction you want, and it's pushing back towards your workpiece because of the bevel. Now, normally go a good halfway, or sometimes I might go 3/4. And we repeat the process. So come a couple of mil away. Okay, we've removed that waste. Now we'll get into the more finessing part. Now that I've got you all nice and close, this is where you need a sharp chisel, or a couple of sharp chisels. And all I do normally is I'll pop the chisel in the actual knife mark that I made earlier, or in this case the marking gauge mark, and I'll come up on an angle. Okay, so then that way it opens it up and it actually allows me to visibly see that scribe mark. And I don't do it on all edges, I pretty much just do it on the side that I'm working on. And I suppose the only other thing is I did say finesse, and that's pretty much what we're doing here. You can see I have no pieces in the back here to prevent blowout. It's actually quite delicate work to create such bespoke dovetails. So now I've just changed to a smaller chisel, so a 1/4 inch or a 6 mil, and all I'm going to do is pretty much angle this back to this point here, and I'm not going to go any further. So I'm going to get all them done, and then you'll see the next part. And often I've grabbed my larger chisel, and all I do here is put my chisel in the knife mark, and just like a guillotine, I'm pretty much just following that scribe. Okay, so I just do from here to here, so that's pretty much on a 45. And I do this with all of them. Okay, now that side's done, I'm just going to turn the piece around, but I'll you can see there. You can see there what I've pretty much done. So they're all angled back. You can see how well that timber's polishing up to just with the sharp chisel. So now I'll work on this side. Okay, so now I'm pretty much just going to reverse the process. So I'm going to start with here. Now that they're done, I'm just going to gently take them off. And now I'm going to reverse this. So I'm going to do what I did on the other side. Bring it up on an angle. And now to get this square, I'm pretty much going to line this here up with this other, with the opposite face. And by doing so, is just going to bring them up nice and plumb. Okay, now that all those shoulders are good, I'm just going to come in and make sure all these are married up nicely. And all I do to make sure that they are square, I don't run a square on it, I normally just get my chisel and see if there's any gaps, basically, and there's none. Okay, so they're pretty sweet. Now let's get our drawer front and mark out our sockets. So I've located my face mark and edge mark, and I want these two to line up with my face and my edge mark. So normally all I do for this is pop it in the vise, and then I like to put a straight edge on, in this case a steel rule, just to make sure those two edges marry up nicely, because this is where my two face marks are. And I'm just looking for a slither of light to run through, and I pretty much just want to close that up. Okay, now that I've got that where I need it, I've got my marking knife. I'm going to press down firmly. And all I do here is just a few light passes. I won't mark this face, just the sides of the pins. And what I'm actually doing to try and, because I want these to be nice and snug, so you want them to the point where when you tap them in, they should want to sing for you, but not crack any of the, or split any of the timber. Because probably as a borderline, you'll want them to, if you can press them in with your hand, that's really good too. If you press them in and it's loose, that's not so good. So I've got those marked. And now, with my marking gauge, because that's still set to the same depth that I've got on these sides, I mark from the inside face, just where I need to remove. What we want to do is get my verniers, before we move this aside, I just want to measure that thickness, and because I only want to mark, or scribe I should say, where the actual sockets are, just a light pencil pass, and I want to reset my marking gauge. That's pretty good. It's just a titch deeper, and from here all I want to do is obviously just run those square marks across and we can start making them. And just again, light passes. You don't need to go sick, because there's a fair chance that if you go too hard from the first your first try, you'll make your knife move, because it'll end up wanting to ride the grain. So just nice and light. Okay, and then from there I've got my marking gauge set, and I'm just gonna take it to where the sockets are actually getting removed. Okay, now I am going to cut these out. So once again, I've got my little dovetail saw, or general purpose Japanese pull saw, and I'm just going to come about 1/2 mil away from that line, and I'm not pushing hard, I'm letting the saw do the work, and I'm using as much of the saw blade as possible, just because it'll help remove the waste better. As you make a pass, all the debris or sawdust will fall down, as opposed to doing your 1-inch strokes. Okay, and now I'm just going to change to my Dazuku rip saw, and I'm going to do some relief cuts. Okay, now that they're sitting there, I've got it clamped down nice and snug to the workbench, I'm going to remove this waste. Okay, so same applies as before. I'm going to line my chisel up, being a couple of mil away from the scribe line. A bit of bounce. So I've got a bit of bounce. It's a bit better. Now that we've removed the waste, this is where we look at cleaning it all up. So I'm going to start with the end grain here and square that in through here. And the reason why I do that is so any slips gets taken by the waste. As you can see there, I've got a good 1.5 mm. Any of the waste there will clean that way. When I clean it back, it'll be nice and crisp inside. And then I'll look at doing these 2 corners and then come with the top. So pretty much same as before. Just going to line it up. And throughout the demonstration on these dovetails, you can see the way that I'm holding or grasping my chisel. I'm really grabbing it quite firmly at the neck, at the end here, just so I keep any damage to a minimal. So, and now that that's done, now it's pretty much moment of truth. We'll put these two together. Okay, and there you go. Beautiful, perfect dovetails. So, inside's nice. Obviously, if it was glued and clamped up, that little gap there would disappear, but that's pretty much what you're after with a dovetail finish. So pretty much there you go. That's how I always make my dovetails. Whether it's a 2-pin like this, or I might have 4, I might have 5. It doesn't really matter. I always look at making my dovetails to the best of my ability, and just something for you to be a little bit aware of. Any newcomers out there that are wondering how I've done such an awesome job on these dovetails. But pretty much it comes down to your sharpening technique, your tool technique. So, well, not more so sharpening technique, as long as you're sharpening your chisels and they are just sharp, whether you've gotten a coarse stone only or a really fine stone only, it's just getting it as sharp that you possibly can, just to makes life easier, because a blunt tool does dull work and a sharp tool is going to do sharp work. So now also in creating these, what I used to do when I first started off was I've got a combination square, and I used to sit it inside the shoulder of this the lapped section, or the socket section, and that way at least I've got a reference point and I can see if it's square. These days I don't use a square, I pretty much just eye it off and level myself off with the joint till once you do that, you can basically see it if it's going too far up, which, because of the way that I create the dovetails, they're always splaying upwards, not downwards. And I don't believe in making big gouge marks, in taking material off and just leaving the inside of the joint look all stroppy and sloppy, just because it's how I was taught and how it was drummed into my head by my mentors and masters. So the other thing that I just want to mention, which I've seen a few other guys do dovetails, and they pretty much do a half pin on the ends, and then they might do 2 in the center. So that, to the best of my knowledge, is the correct way to set a dovetail. So whether you're only coming in 6mm, 10mm, 20mm, it makes no difference, but there should be a shoulder on the top and a shoulder on the bottom. Each side, so creating a draw side, and so your dovetail pins and your socket on one side for a typical 3 to 4 pin or socket or pinned dovetail draw. It takes me around the 15 to 20 minutes, I reckon, per side. So around 40 minutes a draw, let's say, give or take a little bit. When you're making 1, it does take a little bit longer, but when you're making 5, you get in a rhythm and you actually do produce them a lot more quicker. But in saying that, if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel, and yeah, and also, which is I'm gonna highly recommend, go down the bottom, leave a comment for me if you've got any questions, or there's a particular joint that you'd like to see done, as I will be getting onto the roll of these, of creating more joints. And also I want to start hitting some builds. I've got a couple of nice little ones I want to tee up. actually, while I've got you as well, I'll show you something I'll show you something I've been working on. So silly me, honestly, this would have been an awesome little build to demonstrate the type of work that I do and the quality that I push out. But this is a custom-made picture frame with key dovetails, and the materials I'm using, I've got this ready tone timber, is called River Red Gum, and these keys are a mesmate, but they're figured grain or fiddleback. And also the client wanted me to personalise it for them in a specific font. I couldn't tell you what font it is, but safe to say they're pretty stoked. So I better crack on and yeah, start getting some stuff done. So I'll catch you all next time. Please go ahead and give these dovetails a try. Just obviously it's a long video, so if you made it this far, awesome. But practicing it this way, doing it this way, you might feel that it's taking a long time, but you'll find that there's more enjoyment in the actual joint. So yeah, but I'll see yous. And if you haven't already, check me out on Instagram, link below in the description, and you can also find me on Facebook, link below in the description. And thirdly, I am now on Snapchat, which I will leave my username in the description for you as well. So if you're on Snapchat, you can find out what I'm up to all the time. See ya.